When ice became currency, could you envision a world where cold itself held monetary value? Where blocks of ice extracted from frozen lakes were as precious as gold, used to purchase meat, milk, and even services? It sounds like science fiction, but it was a reality, and not so long ago. In the 19th century, long before the advent of electric refrigerators, a peculiar phenomenon occurred in the United States. What is now as commonplace as opening a freezer was, at the time, a costly, rare, and highly coveted luxury. Amidst the fervor of the Industrial Revolution, the nation was undergoing a period of rapid transformation, and within this transformative landscape, an unusual commerce emerged: the trade of ice. But not just any ice, it was pure, crystalline ice, harvested from the frozen waters of the North, like the lakes of Massachusetts. Men risked their lives in the winter to cut enormous blocks, using saws and axes, stacking them in insulated depots filled with sawdust, waiting for summer to sell them. These frozen behemoths journeyed across the country by ship, braving the southern heat, all to ensure one thing: freshness and preservation. That's when the unexpected unfolded. In sweltering locales like New Orleans or Havana, ice transcended its utilitarian purpose. It became a veritable commodity. Its value soared to such an extent that families bartered blocks for perishable foodstuffs, such as milk or meat, that required refrigeration. In certain instances, even services were transacted with ice as payment. It was, quite literally, an icy economy. But what happens when your currency melts away over time? How can you trust a system based on something so ephemeral? This is one of the most fascinating stories about how humanity has placed value on unexpected elements. Ice, a symbol of freshness and purity, has become part of an economic engine, shaping logistics, consumption, and even the architecture of cities. Get ready to uncover how this phenomenon has shaped industries, saved food, and influenced the modern world in ways you never imagined. And in the end, a question lingers. What else has served as money that you'd never guess? At the dawn of the 19th century, the notion of preserving fresh food for extended periods was a distant dream for most American families. In the absence of refrigerators, meat would spoil within days, milk soured in mere hours, and preserving any comestible was a daily struggle. It was within this landscape of scarcity that a visionary discerned something others overlooked: ice as a commodity of immeasurable value. This man was named Frederic Tudor, a young man from Boston who, in 1806, conceived a seemingly outlandish idea: to sell tropical ice. More precisely, he envisioned extracting ice from the frozen lakes of New England during the winter, storing it in ships, and transporting it to the hottest regions of the world. His first destination? The Caribbean. The initial response was one of derision. The press labeled him a madman. Are you going to sell ice to the tropics? And how do you intend to prevent it from melting on the way? Scoffed the skeptics. However, Tudor remained undeterred. He refined rudimentary insulation techniques utilizing sawdust, a cheap byproduct of the region's sawmills, and developed vessels with hand-built refrigerated compartments. Surprisingly, it worked. On his maiden voyage, although he lost a portion of his cargo, Tudor arrived in Havana with entire blocks of ice intact, a feat inconceivable for the era. Havana's elite was astounded by this novelty. Ice not only chilled beverages and preserved food, it also embodied luxury, sophistication, and modernity. The initial success spurred a nascent industry in the United States. In a short span, the harvesting of natural ice became a frenzied undertaking. During the harsh winters of Massachusetts and New Hampshire, dozens of laborers would fell blocks weighing up to 100 kilograms from the thick ice covering the lakes. They employed handsaws, horse-drawn sleds, and subsequently makeshift tracks to expedite transportation to the ports. The ice was stacked in isolated depots with thick layers of sawdust, where it could remain solid for months. The efficiency of this system allowed blocks to reach as far south as the United States, Central America, India, Brazil, and even Australia, even during the height of summer. With the increasing supply and demand, ice transitioned from a luxury reserved for the elite to a commodity circulating among local merchants and urban families. In regions plagued by relentless heat and lacking refrigeration, it became as indispensable as bread and water. Parallel economies sprung up around its distribution, and, astonishingly, commercial transactions began to be conducted with ice as a form of payment. It was the birth of a fleeting currency, shaped by the cold and melted by the sun, an idea that could only blossom in a time where innovation was synonymous with risk and courage. As the ice trade flourished, its economic and social ramifications deepened considerably. What had begun as a whimsical venture by Frederic Tudor evolved into a multi-billion-dollar global industry. Entire cities came to rely on natural ice for preserving foodstuffs, supplying hospitals, conserving cadavers, and even ensuring the smooth operation of upscale restaurants and bars. In the southern United States, ice has revolutionized daily life. In cities like New Orleans, Charleston, and Savannah, the intense heat has made ice a near sacred commodity. It was commonplace for blocks of ice to be traded directly for fresh meat, dairy products, and even manual labor. In poorer areas, small vendors sold ice cubes by weight, treating them as valuable, perishable gems. Hospitals began requisitioning regular shipments to keep critically ill patients cool and prevent infections. Ice transitioned, quite literally, into an essential resource, elevating it to the status of a functional currency. Its value was tied not only to its scarcity, but also to the vital social and sanitary role it played. As consumption surged, novel international trade routes materialized. Tudor and his rivals commenced exporting ice from American lakes to British India, the Imperial Brazilian territories, Australia, and even to African colonies. In Calcutta, for instance, the arrival of ice blocks was celebrated with festivals. The ice was carefully stored in subterranean ice houses, which employed principles of natural ventilation to decelerate melting. But, as with every revolution, this one too would face its own winter. The first harbinger of change arrived with the advent of artificial ice-making machines in the late 19th century. As early as 1851, the inventor John Gorrie was experimenting with mechanical refrigeration methods, striving to produce ice locally, untethered from the reliance on frozen lakes or arduous maritime journeys. Despite encountering technical hurdles and resistance, these machines foreshadowed a revolution unfolding in hushed tones. Simultaneously, excessive deforestation and the predatory exploitation of lakes began to take a toll on the environment. Milder winters in certain regions hindered the extraction of sufficient natural ice. The confluence of technological advancements and logistical hurdles threatened to erode the dominance of the ice industry. The transition was gradual. In major urban centers, ice factories began to manufacture blocks artificially. Those who had once wielded the tools of the trade, the traditional ice cutters and lake transporters, witnessed their livelihood vanish. What had once been a precious commodity, a veritable gold standard, was now mass-produced with the aid of engines and chemical agents. Nevertheless, the impacts of the natural ice economy were enduring. It influenced the construction of homes with refrigerated cellars, the logistics of perishable foods, and even the mindset of modern consumption. Ice helped forge the concept of freshness, comfort, and preservation, pillars of contemporary urban society. And to think that for decades, the value of ice was so high that you could literally buy a meal with a chunk of it. For decades, ice has shaped behaviors, businesses, and even cultures. It was a symbol of status, a tool for survival, and cold hard cash, or rather, money that melted away. Today, when we open the door of a refrigerator or grab a bag of ice at the supermarket, we rarely contemplate the effort, the risk, and the ingenuity it took to make this coldness commonplace. But the episode of ice's currency is not merely a quaint historical curiosity. It reveals something more profound: humanity's capacity to ascribe value to the ephemeral, to transform a natural resource into a cornerstone of economics, health, and daily life. Ice helped forge the concept of freshness, comfort, and preservation, pillars of contemporary urban society. And to think that for decades, the value of ice was so high that you could literally buy a meal with a chunk of it. For decades, ice has shaped behaviors, businesses, and even cultures. It was a symbol of status, a tool for survival, and cold hard cash, or rather, money that melted away. Today, when we open the door of a refrigerator or grab a bag of ice at the supermarket, we rarely contemplate the effort, the risk, and the ingenuity it took to make this coldness commonplace. But the episode of ice as currency is not merely a quaint historical curiosity. It reveals something more profound: humanity's capacity to ascribe value to the ephemeral, to transform a natural resource into a cornerstone of economics, health, and daily life. Ice was an invisible revolution, as silent as water, yet powerful enough to move ships, generate jobs, and inspire technologies. History also teaches us that not all money needs to be printed on paper or cast in metal. Over time, we have used salt, shells, feathers, cigarettes, stones, and yes, even ice as forms of payment. Money, ultimately, is a social convention based on utility, scarcity, and trust. When these three conditions converge, anything can become currency, even cold. And to think that it all began with a visionary young man named Frederic Tudor who dared to sell winter to the tropics. Initially ridiculed, he eventually created a global network that redefined dietary habits, influenced medicine, and foreshadowed what would become the refrigeration revolution. Today, we live in an era where ice is produced in seconds anywhere in the world. But do we still comprehend the true value of things? What is abundant today was once exceedingly scarce, and what we deem disposable was, at some point, fundamental to human survival. The ice economy demonstrates that value is in the eye of the beholder. In the sweltering tropics of the 19th century, coldness was a luxury. In urban centers, it was a necessity. And amidst this, ice became currency. Not because it was cold, but because it was prized, utilitarian, and perishable. It symbolized control over time, sustenance, and well-being. It represented power. Now tell me, what are we using today as currency without even realizing it? What are we valuing, accumulating, exchanging, and which, perhaps in the future, will be as commonplace as an ice cube? If you enjoyed this story and want to discover other unconventional forms of currency throughout history, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the Enriching World channel, and hit the notification bell. There's much more to come. Salt coins, absurd medieval tributes, economies based on shells, and even a tribe that used giant stones as currency. And you? Have you ever encountered or used any unexpected currency? Share your story in the comments below. You never know, it might be featured in the next video.